Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to have a good time here. We have the awesome Eric Graham, and we're
Morning.
going to talk about easements, encroachments, surveys, and title commitments. And I know you all woke up to learn all about that. So we're going to try to make it easy, simple, and a little exciting to learn about. So we're going to get started with Eric. Hi,
Yeah,
Eric.
so thank you, Cindy. So I know that this topic is probably one of the worst topics that people want to talk about or listen to. I'm just letting you know. All right, there's nothing exciting about easements, encroachments, surveys, or title commitments. But let's go into some things here because many of you, you would have to agree on this statement that the worst time for a buyer to learn that an easement affects the property is after closing.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Oops. So, or when we're moving trees, or construction is being restricted, or an access is disputed, or the property cannot be used as planned. Now that's a real problem. So let's go into some things that we're going to be covering here. We're going to be talking briefly about easements, encroachments, boundary disputes, covenants, maybe even deed restrictions, what surveys are, what we're looking for in a survey, or a subdivision plat, or maybe even a title commitment, briefly reviewing some of these things. We're not going to go super in deep with these topics. I don't want to put you to sleep. I just want you to notice some basic major issues that we're seeing where there's concerns or potential lawsuits that are coming through. And then we want to ensure that when you have a red flag that's raised, that you can involve the proper professional and then ensuring that you're documenting what you've done to prevent any type of risk litigation against you. Now, some basic definitions. Now, this is the most boring part, I can promise you, but we just got to get through it so we can understand a couple of these things. An easement. And truly, just an easement is just a legal right allowing another person or neighboring property owner, or maybe a municipality or an association or utility provider to use a certain portion of the property. That's an easement. Now, the property owner generally still owns the land, but the ownership is subject to this easement holder's rights.
And
So
don't you think
a
that's
lot
one
of
of the
people,
common ones, Eric? The
yeah,
easement?
the easements is always common. Most likely, you're always going to have an easement in the front of a property for utilities. So yes, we mow it. Yes, we pay taxes on it. Yet we really don't own it. You get the
That's the
luxury and joy of
story these
caring for
days.
someone else's property, basically, in my opinion. They tell you you own it, but really an easement allows that utility company to do whatever they want to your property and you won't have a say. Now, there are some times where you might have a say, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Now, Cindy, you were saying what are some of the common easements? And some of the most common easements are utility, drainage, maybe a shared driveway, maybe a private road, an ingress and egress, maybe waterfront access, or a maintenance agreement. These are all types of easements. And then a lot of us deal with, and we kind of put up a blinders, right? What's this? It's an encroachment. What's an encroachment? Well, an encroachment is when you have a physical object or a structure, and it's really passing over maybe the neighbor's boundary property line, or really it occupies an area where it's not legally allowed. Okay. I know so many times we've run across this. Every single one of you out here has run across an encroachment where you have a shed, or maybe the home
Yeah.
was built in 1934 and the garage was built on the other person's property by 1 foot. Those are encroachments.
Yeah, it was like a
And
handshake agreement. So,
yeah, now what else is encroaching? Fences. We always see fences that are encroaching. I don't know how many times. Sprinkler systems I've seen. I personally had one personally. I moved in my home and my neighbor said, "Hey, you need to move your sprinkler heads. They're on my lawn." Well, I was encroaching on their property. So I moved him. I could have been a jerk and said no, but what was the point? I mean, I called someone and got it taken care of. But the easy way to remember is an encroachment is a physical object or improvement located where it might not be allowed to. And again, that easement is a legal right for allowing someone else to do what they need to on the property, most likely utility companies. And when we look at these two types of concerns, some of them are very hard to detect and find out when you walk on a property. We're going to get into a little bit later about how we can find these uh, easements and maybe when something is encroaching on something else. But before we get into that, there's also some other issues that we're going to be talking about, and these are boundary disputes. Um, Cindy, how many times have you been in a boundary dispute? Does it come across your line of work when you're working with neighbors? Do you see a lot of boundary disputes?
I actually have one going on right now on a property that I have accepted offer on a lake property. And it's a driveway. I guess it could be a little bit of an encroachment. It's a boundary dispute, kind of all the above. Yeah, it's no fun because it can take a while to resolve.
Yeah, so and it's not uncommon to have a boundary dispute with an easement concern as well as an encroachment.
Yeah.
Now, a boundary dispute that we see often is occurs when a neighboring owner disagrees about the location of a property line. We can all agree to that. This is why every single person would tell you get a survey before you buy a property. I really wish the law would change where would require both parties to pay 50-50 for a survey because it would reduce a lot of lawsuits and a lot of problems. So many times as listing agents, we don't know what we're truly selling. What do? We look out there, we go GIS, right? GIS is terribly inaccurate. It gives us an idea of what a property might look like, but they are flawed, just letting you know.
Even if there's a
Surveyors,
fence, like in cities and that, even if there's a fence, you can't really go by that either.
no, we can't. And surveyors will always tell you, you really, and if you want to know what you're truly buying, you need a new survey. Because most likely the fence is put up in the wrong spot anyway. And we'll get into how we can address some of those as well. But there's an issue here when something is done inappropriately. It's known as adverse possession. I think all of us have heard the term adverse possession. It's really a legal claim where someone is seeking ownership of another person's land. And they might say, well, yes, I've cared for this property portion of it for 15 years. And now I'm going to, because it's been 15 years, I automatically get it under adverse possession. No, nothing
Mm,
is automatic. Everything has
it's
to go
not
through
that
the
easy.
courts. And to prove adverse possession can be quite challenging. And, and more likely, the term that's happening that you might not be aware of in real estate is a term known as acquiescence. And that's going to be a new term I think you're going to start learning and seeing more of when there's a dispute. For example, someone builds a fence on my property, and both parties just end up living day to day life and pretend that that becomes the new boundary. Even though it might not be the true boundary, they just portray it as a new boundary. And that's dangerous because acquiescence is a term that arises when adjoining owners treat a fence or a hedge or a driveway edge or a tree line or another visible marker as their property boundary for a significant period of time. Once that happens, now someone can claim acquiescence, which is probably a lot easier than adverse possession. So here's an example. I have a neighbor just moved in, nice couple, young couple, moved in the neighborhood. They got a survey and they were going to move their fence 2 weeks after they moved in. Now, this fence is 8 feet back from their boundary line. So the neighbor has an extra 8 feet of property by maybe 80 feet. So 80 feet long by 8 feet. So it's a huge piece of property. The fence was, when the previous owner put up a fence, they put it up 8 feet inside their property line. So there's an extra 8 feet out there. They move in, get a survey. They now want to move the fence. Well, they were chatting with me. I said, well, before you do anything, I don't know how long these people have put the fence there. How I don't know anything about the property, but you're probably going to want to talk to an attorney to figure out what your rights are. But you're definitely going to want to send a certified letter to them that you're going to be moving, you're going to be performing an action. Well, as soon as they did that, guess what? They hired an attorney and now they're both in a lawsuit. One person is claiming acquiescence because they feel that the other neighbor who captured the 8 feet also planted shrubbery in front of the fence. So they tried to keep it their own. And instead of being neighborly, saying, yeah, go ahead and move your fence, just repay me for the landscape. No, they're hiring an attorney. Now both parties have an attorney. They had to cancel moving the fence. So now they're in litigation. Who's going to win? Who knows? So
Yeah.
it's just a waste of time, not very neighborly. But this is the problem. So, in my opinion, that brokerage should be sued because the buyer agent noticed that there was a fence line and probably never called it out to say, hey, look, there might be an issue here that you need to talk to a real estate attorney. The listing agent could potentially, or broker could be potentially sued because they had something there that could be an issue and they never said, hey, you might want to talk to an attorney, get documentation. I think you're going to see more litigation coming up with these boundary surveys and acquiescence and adverse possessions. And the only way to protect yourself is ensuring that you have some type of email stating, hey, talk to an attorney. It's not our jobs as real estate agents to actually determine legal uh, disputes or even counsel them on what their rights are. You know how many times I've heard agents go, "Oh yeah, the property line is where those rows of trees are."
Yeah.
Oh
Or the
really?
telephone pole
Well,
or
the
yeah.
telephone pole. Yeah, that's the property line. Uh, I encourage all of you never say that you think that's where the property line is. Use what attorneys would say is it's a possibility that could be the line, but you're going to really need to get a surveyor out here to find out what the true lineage, where the true lines are. Uh, Again, we're just seeing more and more of these things creeping up with
Yeah, and it
regards to
happens
potential
when
lawsuits.
especially when they go to resell, that's usually when it comes up. They go to resell it in 5 years and then they realize, oh, I thought I owned that property, but I don't own that property, or I do own more of that property. And it can be expensive and messy.
Yes. So what's going to happen when we see these adverse possessions or acquiescence, potential lawsuits, or really not even lawsuits? You basically just have two attorneys standing on the sidelines because no one's going to file a claim and it sits in limbo. Well, hopefully someone does have the survey, and then they can hopefully the attorneys or the neighbors can enter into a boundary agreement. Maybe they can complete a boundary line adjustment through the local municipality through the attorney who can draft that. Maybe they'll grant an easement or even a licensing easement, where maybe they're paid money to be able to access that property. Maybe they'll just have the attorneys negotiate the final settlement. Or worst case scenario, you go to court and you have to ask the attorney or you actually have to get a determination by the judge, which takes forever. Just let you know, there's nothing easy about it.
Yeah.
So, what would be an appropriate agent response to any of these types of things when it comes to boundaries? Is that really that the survey identifies the boundary? And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to say that we can't really tell you where this boundary is. You actually need to hire a professional to get a boundary survey to know exactly what you're buying and to also determine whether there was something encroaching on the property, any type of improvements. Now, here's a scenario. A buyer purchases a home partly because of a beautiful row of mature trees on the rear of the property. We ever have those properties? You have these nice trees. No one's building behind you, right? That's why we fell in love with it. We want this home.
Never,
Beautiful
ever,
trees.
ever say
It's
no building.
private. And Several months then after closing, the buyer looks outside and sees a utility contractor trimming or removing trees. Guess what? We never knew that there was an easement back there. Well, that was the easement. Now the trees are gone. Now the buyer, and then basically your buyer will contact you and they'll say, well, was there anything in the title documents that allowed the utility company to enter my property and remove these trees? And what we would have seen if we had looked at it is potentially that there was a recorded utility easement that gave the company the right to come onto that property, that portion, trim any trees, cut them down. So just understand that these recorded easements are always going to cause a problem if we can't let someone know, a buyer know, because they're going to be disappointed. We see this all the time. Now, what's in a title? How do we find these easements? Cindy,
Title
have
commitment.
you ever tried to find easements?
Well, I reviewed the title equipment, the title commitment, but then sometimes it doesn't give enough information, so you have to dig deeper.
Yeah, so I just so if any of you out there are thinking, don't worry, title will find all this. You're misunderstood. I don't know how more blunt to be. Uh, a title commitment identifies it can identify utility easements affecting the property, but we should obtain the recorded easement document as well.
Yeah.
And a survey can help identify its physical location, and the utility provider or an attorney can answer questions about how it may affect the property. So it's not only title is an excellent tool, but the survey is even more important to actually see where that's going to be. So sometimes we can look at a piece of paper and go, okay, yeah, it's around here potentially, but the survey would really help along with title. So there's multiple or a register of deeds. There's a lot of things that go into trying to find out where the heck these things are and then what they are and what they can and what a utility company can and can't do with them. And Cindy, let's say you had a person, and I think we talked about this, and I want to review this again, but after closing, a buyer obtains a survey, and they're showing that there is an existing fence inside the buyer's deeded boundary, and the plot, and buyer wants to move it and rebuild it, and then get it resurveyed and to show where the new improvement was. And we keep seeing the same issue. You cannot move the fence. My family has maintained and controlled that land for 20 years. I'm just letting you know, fences,
Yeah.
outbuildings, improvements are so ugly, and we should never, as agents, tell someone, don't worry about it. I mean, a
Yeah.
survey, I think, should be mandatory. I just keep coming back to how important a survey is for buyers.
I like on some of the purchase agreements, it actually says that, the buyer wants a survey or waives a survey, but it's something at least says that you recommended they get a survey.
Yeah, and those surveys can help. Again, a survey can help with property corners, improvements, what was put on the property, recorded easements, it can show possible encroachments, access concerns, gaps or overlaps of where property lines are. So, uh, and again, agents should never state the following. Please don't ever state that a fence or tree line marks the legal boundary, or a GIS or tax map is the same as a survey. They are not the same. Never say or don't state an old survey is is accurate. I've seen a lawsuit where the previous survey was incorrect and the new one superseded it. And then I started thinking, well, okay, our survey's correct when they get done. Well, people are human. It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes a survey could be flawed, and then we have to get another surveyor out. I've seen where there's been three survey companies and none of them can agree. So now we have to get attorneys involved and local municipality attorneys, and it's just it's weird. And that's a one-off. It doesn't happen often, but I've had that happen once. Of course, if something weird's going to happen, it's going to happen to me.
Everything weird happens in real estate.
It does. And so another issue that's so important to people is title commitments. Uh, I, I think in real estate, if I was going to complain about something, it would be title commitments. And when agents get them, they seem to fire them off to their client and say, "Hey, read this over, and if you have any questions, call me. Goodbye."
They're like, what did I
And,
get in the mail? What is this thing?
and title commitments are so much more than that. Uh, there's so many times in a title commitment, there's different parts of it, and I'm going to briefly go through them. There's a Schedule A, a Schedule B, that's part one, a Schedule B, that's part two. Uh, in Schedule A, identifies the basic information, including current owner, proposed insured, legal description, property info, policy amount, and effective date. It really has addresses, ownership, legal descriptions. And if any of you are dealing with a two parcel selling or buying, make sure both of those parcels are identified in
Oh,
your
yeah.
title commitment. I think that's probably one of the biggest lawsuits that we see all the time is when there was intent to sell two parcels. The buyer agent only writes one, it closes, and a year later, the buyer or the seller, I'm sorry, a year later, the seller gets a tax bill for that second parcel that was supposed to be sold. But guess what? No one caught it on the title commitment that there should have been two parcels, two tax ID numbers. And you'll be able to see the tax ID numbers on that. So if you are selling multiple parcels together and they have different tax ID numbers, make sure it's on the title commitment, both from selling and buying. And then
Very
Schedule B.
important.
Schedule B is a big issue that gets overlooked. We kind of glance over it, but Schedule B, Part 1, identifies requirements that must be completed before title policy is issued. Basically, in title and Schedule B, Part 1, they're telling you these are the documentations that we need. An example, if you're ever dealing with a trust, it's going to say in their certificate of trust existence and authority, it's going to need a copy of it. If you're dealing with someone who has passed away, it might say copy of death certificate. So don't glance over Part B, Part 1, or Schedule B, Part 1 of the title company is basically your homework of what documentation that the title company might need. And don't delay on those. Some of those things take a while to obtain. So many of us will look at it and glance over and not realize that that's homework for you. And
Yeah, it's
then
our
3 days before
responsibility to
closing,
get
we're
those.
scrambling, trying to get some certain things.
Yeah.
So try to avoid that. And then Schedule B, Part 2, basically are all the exceptions from the proposed title company. In this Part 2, the Schedule B, Part 2 may include utility easements that they're not going to insure on. It may include shared driveway easements, private road agreements. So this Schedule Part 2 is pretty serious because it's now going to spell out all of your easements, covenants, shared driveways, restrictions, HOA potential documents, mineral reservations, survey exceptions, the rights of others, and on and on. Yeah, my head's already spinning after naming all of this. And just understand that the summary may not explain where the easement is located, or who may use it, or whether structures are prohibited, whether trees can be removed, or who's responsible for the maintenance. The underlying recording document should be obtained. And what it's going to say is easement recorded in LIBOR, page, whatever. Those are the documents that you might actually want to get a hard copy from the title company, the specific document that will spell out what that easement is or what that restrictive covenant is. Yes, did I just make a lot more homework for title companies? Possibly, but some of these things get looked over so often that without having the true nature of what that easement is or restriction, how do you know what to tell your client or show your client
Yeah, like
so
a
that if
private
they need
road
to talk to an
agreement,
attorney?
Eric, a private road agreement, you need to have a copy of that because you can't tell your buyer what they're responsible for, who the repair, you know, or a shared driveway, or that stuff is very, very, very important. And you don't want them to find that out after they close.
Yeah, and like city, I mean, a shared driveway is not automatically a problem. So agents, if you're dealing with shared driveways, they're not automatically problems. The important question is what rights and responsibilities are established in the recorded document for your buyer and seller. And agents, what you can do is you can help the client determine whether a recorded easement exists. You can help them know uh, who has the right to use the driveway. You can help them provide legal access or whether it provides legal access, or who maintains it, who does snow removal or repairs or drainage, or how are repair costs allocated. Um, we've always said that if you don't have a private road agreement in place, you need to have one before you close. It will protect your buyer. The seller doesn't care because they're moving on, but really now it's the seller's problem to get the
Yeah.
private road agreement in place that the buyer can agree upon. A lot of scenarios here. Uh, okay, here's one that we see. I was in neighbor's garage crosses a boundary. So a survey shows that the neighbor's garage extends 2 feet onto the subject property. Anyone ever have that? I'm sure you did. All of us have looked at this and go, "Oh, please! I hope they still want this." I spent so much time. This is the 20th house they've looked at, and this is in the price range, and this darn garage is now 2 feet over. Can't move it. What do you do? Anyone? Basically, what most
Well,
of us do, we just close our eyes, hope they sign, and we worry about a problem later.
no, because it'll always come back to you.
But what we might want to consider is, yes, in the very beginning, we probably should have had them talk to an attorney
Yeah.
because this could be a very serious issue. You have what's called an encroachment. Yes, it's been there for 50 years. You could have acquiescence because both parties have agreed. You could have adverse possession, but all of these would require a judge or an attorney to draft something. And if you don't get it resolved now, your buyer can buy it, right? No problem. But when they go to sell, guess what? Now they're on the hook to resolving an issue, and now they're going to be angry with you that
Yep.
you never had the previous person resolve it. And that typically the only way to do this is to hire an attorney and have an easement drafted, or you can have a boundary line adjusted, granting the new owner or granting that little 2 feet to the property owner. Maybe they pay a little money to the other party. Maybe the other party doesn't care. They don't want to deal with it in the future as well. But it can be a problem. So if you know of something, your job is to get documentation in place, letting them know that they should talk to an attorney. If they don't want to address it, fine. But all we can do is counsel them to talk to an attorney, and then make sure you keep that in dot loop in case there is a lawsuit somewhere down the road. You can say, well, I explained to them that they needed to talk to an attorney about this issue, in my opinion.
Yep. We need documentation. That's no word
Here's a
of
big one.
mouth.
Here's a big one that I just ran into just actually on Sunday. Intended use. Anytime you are a buyer's agent out there, I think agents should start thinking more about intended use for the client. Ask the question, hey, what's your intended use on this property? Well, I want to put a pool in. Okay. Well, you better go and find out if there's any neighborhood covenants and restrictions. What are the setbacks? You might want to do some preliminary work or title work before even an offer. Or if you get into it, you might need to extend your inspection period or make it contingent upon the buyer being able to get approval for a pool based on local municipality. Otherwise, the purchase agreement will become null and void. Or even a pole barn is another big one that people want.
Oh.
So
Yep.
keep in mind, pools and pole barns, there are setbacks. So this property had a 30-foot setback. The yard was too small to put a pool in. And on the side of the property, you couldn't put a pole barn in because of the setback. And they took this perfectly 1 acre parcel and put the home towards the back, just enough to screw up the back inside that you can't do anything with it, and had this huge front yard that sloped down. Great. You have a great front yard, but you can't use it. So congratulations to the builder or whoever put that together. You basically limited your ability to put other things around the home on the perimeter. So
Plus,
just
well
keep
and
that in
septic,
mind.
you have to keep in mind too, where well and septic
Yeah,
is. It can
well
make a
and septic
huge
was out there.
difference.
Yep. So the biggest thing is agents just understand warning signs. And if you feel that there's red flags, make sure that your clients are talking with the right professionals and explaining explaining the issue without practicing law is very difficult. And I want to take a second here. It's a simple three-part method. Identify the issue. My example that I have here is the title commitment identifies a utility easement affecting the rear of the property. That's your identifying the issue. That's what you need to say. If there's something that's affecting the property, tell them. Second, explain the concern. The easement may give the utility provider access and maintenance rights and may restrict trees, fences, structures, or landscaping in the area. So we identified it, we explain our concern, and then we recommend the appropriate professional. The recorded document and survey should be reviewed. The utility provider can answer operational questions, and an attorney should address legal interpretation. Yes, attorneys are going to be brought into more and more contracts, I believe, because there's a lot here. I think a lot of us have been very fortunate that we haven't had to use or need attorneys, thankfully. Uh, but the time that you didn't recommend to talk to an attorney, you'll end up, if you ever get named in a lawsuit for negligence because you didn't provide them with the opportunity to talk to a an attorney. And then they also add two other different counts of things, which that's what attorneys like to do, apparently. Name a bunch of different things that you've done, even though you haven't, but that's what they're doing. And then also make sure you're always sharing title commitment and keeping everything in dot loop. Dot loop's important that you upload everything that you share. Uh, keep it keep it reserved. Uh, don't lose anything. And as soon as you get it, put it into dot loop. There's too many times where we go into your loops, and sometimes we don't see the document because maybe the agent hasn't put it into dot loop yet, and it makes it a challenge for us to try to help you. So as soon as you have executed documents, drop them in dot loop, or if you're working on a dot loop, that's even better when you share because it maintains it within dot loop, so we can always find it. And then label your folders. Organize the folder so that we can see things in order of how they were written, agency disclosure, purchase agreements, addendums. If you can make sure that they're named properly and in a list, if you ever need help, it does help us, help you quicker. Uh, and my closing message on this topic would be that one, an easement is a legal right to use the land. An encroachment is a physical object or improvement located where it may not legally belong. A survey can identify any deeded boundary, but it does not automatically resolve claims based on historical use or acceptance of another boundary. Agents try to recognize warning signs, obtain and share relevant documents, ask about intended use. That's the biggest thing, intended use. Avoid unsupported assurances. We've seen too many lawsuits where, well, the agent told me this, the agent told me that. Don't give them reassurances that it's going to be okay. We don't know if it's going to be okay. Sometimes it's best to say nothing because as soon as you give an assurance that this was going to be okay without them talking to someone as an attorney or something or a surveyor, you now put yourself in jeopardy. And recommend the proper professional review and then document your client's informed decisions. Documentation is what's going to keep you out of harm's way from litigation. And again, the worst time for a buyer to learn about a utility easement is when the utility company is there cutting down their trees, which is always a great thing because you're going to get a call wondering what the heck is going on. And then the worst time to learn about a boundary dispute is when the buyer is already moving their fence and you get a call and your client gets a call from the attorney or the neighbor to stop and halt things. So never good things, but we're always here as broker support. Please give us a call, reach out to us, let us know if there's anything we can do. If there's any quick questions that we can try to answer, by all means, uh, Cindy can answer anything that you have. So let's fire away.
So ask me questions. Is there any
Cindy.
questions? No questions? Thanks, Penny.
Well, if there are questions, you know how to reach out to us. You can email if there's a question that you need something, just email us
Yep.
or Eric at 5starleaders.com, or there's Cindy at 5starleaders.com. There's Kim at 5starleaders.com. Doug at 5starleaders.com. Uh, don't email
Broker
Don.
support.
Don
Broker
doesn't
support at
know.
5-Star Leaders.
I had a question.
Yes.
So I had a property that I don't, it didn't have a utility easement, but there were lines going across the back of it. And the utility company came in and decided to start cutting the trees. Is that, like, do they actually have the ability to do that?
Yes, because they have to
Mhm.
ensure wherever most likely there is an easement somewhere there. Uh, whether it was recorded or not could be the other issue, but normally utility easements are everywhere on properties. Drainage easements are there. I'd be surprised that was it the title company that said that they couldn't find one? Do
Yeah,
you know?
we didn't see one. Yeah,
Did they have a survey performed?
not, not at the time. No.
Okay.
I think I would
Yeah,
call
again,
the utility company.
yeah, you could have called them to see what
We,
their operational procedures are.
Yeah, we
Uh,
did. And they were like, well, if you don't, want them cut, I guess we can see if we can do something different, and I'm like, yeah, like we don't want them cut.
yeah, so there's possibility
Wow.
maybe they didn't have one. That surprises me when they would have set that up, that they didn't have one, but who knows? Again, nothing surprises me anymore in real estate.
Well, me too.
Anything else?
I did have a client back in the day that we were aware of a utility easement on the side of their home, and the utility easement, because it was such a small little parcel on the corner, utility easement would have come like within 6 inches of their fence. They would have had to the utility if they had to come through, they would have had to move the fence closer to the home. And my clients were not very happy about this, and they ended up suing consumers, and they won. Even though there was an easement there, they fought them, and they ended up getting around $25,000 from consumers. They fought them, and they got a judgment because what the utility company was trying to do would really interfere with their uh, quiet enjoyment or enjoyment of their property or intended use. And the judge ruled in their favor. So that was a
Interesting.
win for them.
I
Doesn't
have a
always happen that
question.
way. Yeah.
Tim?
When you're talking about never say, well, the property line's here or there. Does that extend to you should probably never pull up an Onyx app or anything like because they're not the most accurate things. I've looked at them myself. If we pull that up and show it to the buyer, is that kind of like saying, here's where your property line is? Should we do that?
Yes, you can do that, but you should always have a caveat of in order to verify for sure what you're buying, you need a survey. This is
Okay.
only just as only from this program. This can help show you a little bit about what the property might look like, but the only way to truly know is to get a survey.
Okay, so just pulling it up doesn't really cross any
No,
boundaries,
because
just as
we're gonna
long as
pull
you
up
caveat it.
GIS. We're gonna pull up GIS maps.
Yeah.
You just can't be sitting there saying, "Hey, here's the property line,"
Okay,
Yeah, it's more of a
because we don't know.
guide.
watch the
We don't
wording.
know where the property line is. Hey, this is just a sample of what it might look like. The only way to truly know is by getting a survey.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
We
I
don't
think
want,
we're
here's the
done.
thing, we don't want to become so rigid where we're always like, well, I can't help you. Talk to an attorney. I can't tell you anything. Talk to an attorney. Well, then why the heck are we needed? We're here to guide them. Our job and our role is to point out red flags or potential concerns so that they can then, if need be, hire the other professional that deals with those things, such as boundaries or surveys, or an attorney based on what their rights are, if there is an encroachment or if there's a boundary disputes. We can't give them legal advice on what their rights are with a boundary dispute or an acquiescence claim or an adverse possession claim. We can just say, hey, sorry that this is happening, but you really need to talk to an attorney on some of these things.
Yeah. Okay. Eric, thank you. It was
It made me
great.
better. I feel much better. I was very cranky before I came on today. I
Yeah,
just
he
want to
was
let
in
you
a
know.
bad mood, everybody, just so you know, but he's doing
Yeah,
good.
so thank you for listening.
Thanks, you guys. This was great. Hope you have a wonderful week and enjoy the sunshine.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you.
Take care, everyone.